we'll send a recording to everybody as well once this is done. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining NSBA and our friends from the wonderful law firm of McCarter and English for what we think is going to be a great conversation. My name is Molly Day. I'm the VP of Communications here at NSBA, and I'd like to do some quick introductions and a couple of ground rules. We plan to have about a 10-minute Q&A toward the end of the session. So any of your questions, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we will get to those just as quickly as we can toward the end. Uh, eh, we have all lines muted. Obviously, this is a live stream. We're very happy to have everybody joining us. Please feel free to share this to your cohorts and let them know about NSPA, and certainly the experts at McCarter and English if you need any help with contracting issues or any other kind of small business issues. First, I'd like to introduce our fearless leader, Todd McCracken. He is president and CEO of NSBA. He's been with us for more than 35 years and unfortunately has seen his fair share of government shutdowns. He's going to serve as our kind of our policy expert and talk through, how we got here and what's happened. He's also going to be moderating the overall conversation and the Q&A once we get there. Our first guest speaker is Alex Major. He is a partner at McCarter and English and co-chair of the Government Contracts and Global Trade Practice Group over there. He's a retired U.S. Air Force intelligence officer and is a prolific author in the cybersecurity field. Alex is a leading expert in procurement laws and federal regulation standards. Also joining Alex and Todd, we have Franklin Turner, who is also a partner at McCarter and English and co-chair of the Government Contracts and Global Trade Practice Group. Franklin works regularly with the media to offer his insight on the procurement industry and has extensive experience representing a broad array of companies. He's helped with payment disputes with the federal government and prosecuted and defended bid protests and much more. So you're in very good hands with our experts today. What I would like to do now is turn it over to Todd to kind of give us a policy background on the government shutdown.
Sure. Thank you, Molly. And thanks, Alex and Franklin. We'll get to them in a minute, though. But, well, folks, here we are again. The government shutdown. I feel like this has happened. It's actually been a few years since it actually has happened, although we keep getting to the brink successive times, and then the issue gets resolved. It gets resolved shortly after a Saturday night shutdown or something that doesn't wind up mattering very much. But we're in it for real this time, and of course we're here because the Congress was unable to pass its appropriations bills, which fund the government, and the fiscal year ended September 30th. So they've been fighting about whether to do what kind of a CR, as it's called, a continuing resolution to keep the government funded for some period of time for the last few weeks. And there's really, at this point, not an end in sight for this. So hopefully the end will come. It always does. It's not clear what that final negotiation is going to look like. But this is poised to be among the longest, if not the longest, shutdown in history, because there is not an aggressive negotiation that appears to be happening, at least in public right now, to how to resolve this. So, this is a big deal, I think, for lots of small companies. And we're going to get to the procurement piece in a minute because that's what affects the most companies the most severely. But it has a significant effect on all kinds of companies. It's reducing downstream businesses to companies that aren't contractors for a variety of reasons. It's really hurt companies that are waiting for, say, an SBA loan to be approved. Generally speaking, there's 320 small businesses a day getting loans for $170 million every day approved. That isn't happening this month. And that needs to get back in line or it's going to impact the entire economy. But but it's definitely a big issue for contractors. Before we get to that, I also want to mention one other thing that maybe you may be aware of. At the same time that the government shut down, authorization for the Small Business Innovative Research Program, or SBIR, also ended. So while that's not a spending program per se, I mean it is, but it's not an appropriation. It's an authorization. But those companies that are also caught up in the SBIR program are now without a program. And we're working on that as well. But that's a separate path, and I want to make sure that people understand the SBIR is not shut down just because of the government shutdown. Even when the government reopens, if we don't fix SBIR, it will stay shut down following that. So anyway, that's my quick intro. That's the lay of the land. That's what we're facing. And people have a million questions about what does this mean for the contracts? What does it mean for pending contracts? What kind of work should they be doing, not doing? And we're really lucky to have a couple of really good experts here um, uh, uh, to help you address those questions. And we'll get to some questions at the end of your own as well. So with no further ado, and there's been a lot of ado, let's get into it. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. So talk to us about what should a company do? I mean, if they've received a stop work order, give us just sort of the basic outline of what they should be thinking about, how they should be running their company. Should they be doing work, not doing work? Is there a possibility they will get paid? Who wants to start?
Sure, I can sort of launch in here, Alex, and then lateral over. So first of all, thank you, Todd, and thanks to everybody for watching. Look, if you've received a stop work order, to answer your question directly, Todd, then you need to stop working, right? You need to follow specifically what is in your clause. And there are nuances, there's shades of gray, but the bottom line is you need to pay careful attention to the requirements that your KO sends, right? It says stop working. You need to hit a hard stop on all of the work. You need to communicate that to your subcontractors. And then you need to track your costs, right, that you are incurring while the work has stopped, right? There could be all sorts of costs that are at
Yeah.
issue here. So that's kind of the threshold matter. I don't know, Alex, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just simply add, by when you're doing all those things, you also want to confirm everything in writing, and you want to document everything, every email, every call, every cost. We would recommend putting it into a dedicated, shutdown file or cost center so that you can track the idle time, the demobilization, and your restart costs. All of that is going to be very important to preserve your rights, because that's what you're trying to do during this period. And as Franklin notes, if you don't stop work, don't expect payment. So, if you want to voluntarily give of the good of your company to the United States government, go nuts. But just know that you're going to not be paid for it.
Yeah. And if you find yourself kind of in limbo, right, seek assurances from your contracting officer. Seek assurances from your KO that there is funding sufficient to cover the work that you are on the hook for, right? That your company is working on. Seek written assurances. A lot of times, and we've we've dealt with thousands of contracts over the years, have been in many shutdowns in the past, or several shutdowns in the past. You'll see offline examples of communications where someone will reach out and say, listen, can you just float this for a few more weeks, a few more months, and we'll make you whole on the back end. That's just often not the case. And if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And remember, you need that from the KO, from the warranted contracting officer.
Yeah, and on that point, just know that recognize as well. You have to understand what's in your contract and what those obligations are, because there might be some accepted activities for things like safety, national security, or property protection, right? So make sure you understand that. But like Franklin was saying, you have to get that confirmation from your contracting officer in writing. And there are ways to do that, especially now if you can't get a hold of your contracting officer for whatever reason.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah. There are ways to do that. But it's going to be based on the contract. If you're not getting that information in writing and you can't get a hold of your contracting officer, then you really need to understand and how you're interpreting your contract, and maybe putting it to your contracting officer, in writing, even though you're not going to get a response. But it really, if you're in that point where you're in an accepted activity, just that is where you probably really need to speak with counsel.
So, and those are cases, just to clarify, where they have not received a stop work order, right? But they know their agency has been shut down. and they're in this sort of limbo area, that's when they really need to make sure they reached out.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, look, you should have received some communication from your contracting officer. If you haven't, then you need to reach out in writing and try and get a hold of someone and just document your communication efforts every step of the way, right? You want to show that you are doing everything you can in good faith to keep working, to communicate with the KO who's required by statute and regulation to communicate with you, right? So if you find yourself in the unique circumstance of literally there's no one picking up the phone on the other end, right? Then you should certainly document your written outreach to the KO, which will support any downstream requests for costs that you've incurred.
Yeah, and the basis of all of this is the Anti-Deficiency Act, right? So the federal government can't accept voluntary services or obligate funds that haven't been appropriated. So if you are continuing to work and you're working at risk, you're kind of, yeah, it's well intentioned and it might be appreciated, but it can really complicate your relationship with the CO and your audit trail. And then the big boogeyman in the room is, yes, misinterpreting your funding status can even lead to suspension, audit findings, and maybe even False Claims Act exposure. It sounds weird, but we're living in weird times. So if you later invoice services that you shouldn't have, they could see that as a False Claims Act. So again, it's crazy times. So make sure that you are reasonably interpreting your obligations.
One other thing to note as well, right, is that you'll typically, I mean, assume that you receive a standard stop work, right, under 52.242.15, I think. You'll in addition to tracking your costs, and I just want to make sure that we clarify this, track your schedule impacts, right? It's not just your cost. I mean, you have a delivery schedule, you have a performance schedule in your contract. So then when it comes time, when the work starts back up again for you to submit a request for an equitable adjustment, you can kind of measure twice and cut once on this, and you know exactly how much of an extension you're going to need on your schedule, in addition to whatever the cost impacts may be.
And what has been the real world results of this in previous shutdowns? I know it's been a minute, but in the past, if companies that have documented that, have they been able to get a recompense, or has it been a mixed bag depending on agencies, contracts, and a million other factors?
I mean, my typical experience is yes. If it's a real shutdown, right? It's not, as you said at the start, it's not one of these 24-hour things, right? But a real shutdown, then the answer to that is yes, if you can document and show that you need the extension and that you actually did incur the cost at issue. The problem with a lot of folks is that they don't track the cost with sufficient granularity, and they don't track the schedule impacts. So when it comes time to submit an REA, it's not supported. The other thing, right, you should always kind of expect some reflexive, sort of a generalized opposition to costs that the government thinks might be unreasonable, or to a schedule extension that is too long. More often than not, you're able to meet in the middle. But again, the trail of documents is absolutely critical to all of this. And you really also have to understand your contract, right? There's the general FAR clause that I mentioned, but there are also lots of agency specific requirements that are written into these contracts.
Yeah, I would also throw in to all of this, we're talking about you as the contractor, but if you have subs as well, just know that if your subs keep working while you stop, you may owe them costs out of pocket. So again, hopefully we're not coming at this too late, but you need to make sure that when you, with the stop work order that you have, understanding your contract implications, making sure to flow that down. Because you want to be in a good point for that.
Yeah, that's perfect time. That actually my next question was subcontracting. And of course, we have companies that are on both sides of that, who have subcontractors and who are subcontractors. So talk to me about, you mentioned what if you're a company that has subcontractors, but what if you are the subcontractor? What should you be doing in this period?
Pretty much the exact same thing, right? I mean, the obligations that we're talking about in regards to cost recovery, schedule recovery, and et cetera, is all about following the dollars down. So if you are going to be, if the government is raining money on you in either full on stream or drips and drabs, these are the things that you have to do, right? So you want to be sure that you are properly handling your obligations. And if you have concerns that maybe your prime isn't doing everything they're supposed to be doing, or if you have questions, definitely elevate it. And maybe even be very clear. We have not received a stop work order. We will continue to operate pursuant to our subcontract, try to like nudge into, are you cool with this? Because ultimately the prime, like I said, might be they're out of pocket. So
yeah, so it all depends, of course, on what your subcontract actually says, right? I think Alex is exactly right. You definitely want to seek assurances from your point of contact at your prime. If you're the sub, right, you're not in direct prohibitive contract with the government, so you don't typically have the right to talk directly to the contracting officer. There are exceptions, right, in the FAR, where if there's non-payment or if there are other types of issues, you are able to sort of escalate that. But fundamentally, the first thing you can do is understand your subcontract, see what it says. If you're working with some of the more sophisticated contractors, they likely will have translated that contingency down the chain into the subcontract, which would give you the ability. It would give them the ability to hit pause. It says, if we have to stop work, you have to stop work. But if that's not down there, then you need to communicate with specificity to your prime contractor and say, I want assurances that this work I'm performing is going to be funded.
Yeah,
what I'm hearing is,
I was going to say, in terms of checking your contract, look for things like pay when paid or suspension language, right? So that you could focus in, right? And ultimately, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but you have to protect your cash flow, right? Negotiate partial payments or deferrals if and where possible. You're going to want to do that. And really, kind of going back to Franklin's main point, do not rely on rumors. Demand written guidance from your prime. Just get it in writing. Every lawyer you're going to talk to will say, get it in writing. Did you get it in writing? That's going to be one of the first. The two big questions. What does your contract say? Do you have it in writing? Those are the.
What I'm hearing is for both of you is just don't make any assumptions, right? Everything you're doing,
not in this space, because remember, the spigot has been cut off, right? From a taxpayer standpoint, right? The government's shut down. If your program has been affected, there's no money to fund the work, which means you're performing at risk, right? And unfortunately, and I see this, and we represent lots and lots of small businesses as well as very large ones. There's a customer relations trap, right? The small business sometimes thinks, we need this contract. We'll do what we can do around the edges to make sure everything's okay, and we'll be made whole at the end. Just understand that there's no guarantee that would take place, and you would be performing at risk, right? Which hurts small businesses more than any other type of a business, because you have less float in your schedule and less of an ability to kind of neutralize the impacts of a shutdown like that, right?
Yeah. The big takeaway here is you won't be punished for following lawful shutdown guidance, but you can be penalized for ignoring it or mismanaging the legal ripple effects, right? So, so definitely, know what you have to do. Like you were saying, Todd, don't make assumptions. And then, and just keep track of things. Just keep track of things, because after the fact reconstruction of costs probably aren't going to stand up to the muster of an audit or an acclaim. So just keep it contemporaneous.
And for those companies that weren't around for the last time the government actually shut down, should they expect anything different once it reopens in terms of payment? Will there be a backlog? Should they be thinking about cash flow issues even once we're back in business again?
No, I think everything's normal, Todd. Everything's normal.
What would make you think about it? Look, man, the tight ship here in DC, Todd. The reality is, so in terms of backlogs, look, the government has found itself, at least our experience in dealing with contractors, for example, who've had their contracts terminated as part of the DOGE effort, right? Which kind of came in like a wrecking ball at the beginning of the administration. There was a huge backlog in claims and in potential litigation, in requests for payment, et cetera. From a funding perspective, we've seen a huge lag, right? Where in certain circumstances, money will even be appropriated to a contract. The work will have been performed and the KO will say, you're right, you should be getting paid. And then there's another pause in there, right? Because somebody else is reviewing it. So the answer to your question is, it's not usual times here, and you should expect a backlog, right? Which is why knowing your contract and your rights are absolutely key.
And just before we came on, we were talking about this, but I just heard that something else to be kind of conscious of is don't forget that a lot of government workers right now are being not just furloughed, but terminated. So, I don't know to what extent. I mean, right now that's a rumor and allegation, but you could come back to an office that may not exist, right? Or or that sort of situation. So there is a lot of uncertainty in the space right now. So that shouldn't necessarily impact your ability to get paid, but it probably will affect the manner in how quickly you do get paid. So just be aware that there could be some changes when the lights turn back on and there are empty offices.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I want to get to folks' questions, but before we do that, is there any sort of last minute thing that you think I should ask you guys? Some piece of advice that you want to make sure we get out there?
Nothing that springs to mind. I don't know, Alex, you have anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say the most important thing is really, I think, is to audit your contracts portfolio, right? Just know what contracts you have that are fully funded, incrementally funded, or reliant on new appropriations. That's going to be critical. Really just understand what they say. You all have them, you're all collecting the money, which is great. Just make sure you understand that you know what they are, and then revisit your internal controls to make sure that you have documented procedures for stop work, et cetera. Those are the big things. Know what you have to know what you have, and then know what you have to do.
That's great. Well, thank you guys. Well, Molly, are there any questions out there that we should try to address? Maybe not yet. You did see something in the comment section about child care subsidy funding at risk. Do you guys know anything about that? Maybe that's unique to a particular contract or a particular prime.
Child care subsidy funding? No, I mean, my thought would be that would be contract specific. I mean, it would not surprise me if there was kind of a programmatic sort of an erosion or a stop there, but I'm not aware of any specific shutdown related nexus other than maybe there are contracts that are in part reliant on that kind of funding. And if that contract is stopped, then the program would necessarily be impacted. I don't know, Alex, if you have anything else.
Yeah, I haven't necessarily seen that yet. It wouldn't surprise me, but I haven't seen it.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
We do have another question that came in, Todd, and I know that you talked about this at the top of the hour, but can you talk a little bit more about what's ahead for the SBIR program? That was one of the questions at the outset of the talk.
Sure. Well, we don't know. The reality is that the SBIR program expired September 30th. There's that the House unanimously passed a 1-year extension of the program, which we supported. The Senate wasn't able to get that done. We're not sure they will be able to get that done because there's at least one major objector in the Senate, although we think a majority of the Senate is for it. But these days you've got to have unanimous consent. So that's on the offing. There are some stabs at negotiations, but I'm not sure they're leading anywhere yet. At some level, people wouldn't be getting their SBIR money now anyway because the government's shut down, but we want to make sure that it's back on track when the government reopens. And right now I'm a little bit more pessimistic about that than I am about the government reopening itself.
Thanks for that. We have another question from Samantha. She asks, to what degree do you feel the certainty of the government, it's moving all over the place, the government making contracts whole again? If a project gets canceled midstream, what then?
Yeah, you mean, so if a project gets canceled, then you move from kind of the stop work into the termination setting, right? And if your contract gets terminated for convenience, then depending on the clause at issue in your contract, you can request relief. And there you go, right? I mean, in terms of being made whole, you're obviously, if you're terminated midstream, not going to receive the full benefit of the full revenue expectation that you had at the outset of the contract, but you should be able to recover costs in that respect. If you're talking about being made whole in connection with when work resumes, right, after a stop work order, then as we said earlier, the answer to that is really going to be focused on the documents that you have to prove the costs that you incurred, and the schedule extension, if any, that you may be seeking. I don't know, Alex, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's pretty much it. That, making sure that, it's really going to vary. It's going to vary on the agency. It's going to vary on the record that you present to them, and I hate to say this, but even the nature of the contract itself. So these are sort of untested waters at this point.
Okay, thanks for that. We do have another question here from Joel. The administration states that they're able to do away with programs more easily now during a shutdown than outside of a shutdown. Do you have any examples of what they're shutting down?
I haven't seen anything. I've heard the rhetoric. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because the government can always terminate for convenience on a whim. So really not seeing that so far. But that's not to say that it isn't happening. I haven't seen it. Franklin, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. I haven't seen it, and I would also say that at least the track record of the administration since January would suggest that if they want a program to end, it will end, regardless of whether you're in a shutdown posture or not, right? Subject to whatever legal challenges might sort of occur to hit pause on that process. So the answer to that is no. I haven't seen any specific examples either that would be focused in that respect.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Another question from Kevin. Can we still operate under awarded and funded contracts that have not received shutdown notices and expectation of getting paid? Will currently submitted invoices under such contracts be paid currently or later after the government reopens?
You need to take that. I would carry that directly to your contracting officer and ask the question. If you've not been given a stop work order, and if you've been given sufficient assurances that the contracts are funded, as the question would suggest, then you should be fine to continue working, and you should be paid in the ordinary course. If you experience a delay in your invoice, take a look at the invoicing requirements in your contract and communicate directly with the contracting officer to ask the basis for non-payment if you're extending sort of beyond the traditional, 30-day time period. That would be my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and this is another great example where you don't want to make assumptions, and you do want to reach out to the contracting officer. But if you are and have always been invoicing a certain way, don't assume that you should change that up because the government is not answering their mail. It should still be in the mail when they return. So make sure it gets in the slot and adds to the pile underneath the door, so that that you can continue to operate as required under your contract.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. Oh, nope, there was one more SBIR question, I think, for you, Todd. If the SBIR program is terminated, what happens to data rights? Will phase 3 provision also disappear, for example?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak to data rights. I don't know the answer to that question. But folks who are thinking about having a phase 2 or the follow-on, I mean, if it doesn't get reauthorized, the program is gone. Period. It will not exist anymore. So phase 3 will disappear.
Thanks for that. I do want to mention, keep track of the chat. My colleague Shauna Elgin, who's the mastermind behind all this, will post a couple of action alerts on both the federal shutdown and the SBIR program. So the best way to have your say is complete those action alerts. It'll take you 2 minutes. It's a really quick and easy way to do that. So look for those in the chat, those links. If you can't find them in the chat, go to our website. They're prominent there if you look under issues and go to our action center. So make sure that you're letting your members of Congress know that these are important programs to you. So with that, I don't think there are any other questions. Alex, Todd, Franklin, any final words of the day?
No, just thank you all for coming. Yeah, we really appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
Same. Yeah, and thank you guys for helping us here. Thank you.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
everyone. Alex and Franklin, I know you guys are really busy. We appreciate you adding us to the road show. I know there's a lot going on for you both, so thank you for that. And Todd, as always, your insight is helpful. And everyone who joined us today, follow us at NSBA Advocate. Visit our website, and don't forget to do those action alerts. Look in the chat for those links, and hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.